The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, Friends of Community Radio, or any of the affiliate stations airing the show. You're listening to WSFM-LP 103.3 in Asheville, North Carolina. This is The Final Straw, and I'm Bursa Goodness. This show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment, you're free to do so. Just send us an email so we can say hey. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. This show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee, located at 610 Haywood Road. Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville, specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop. This episode contains two segments. In the first, I spoke with Queen Tahrirah about the hunger strike being engaged in by Imam Sadiq Abdullah Hassan and Jason Robb, two death row inmates put there by their attempt to resolve the hostage-taking situation involved in the 1993 Lucasville prison uprising. During the uprising, Jason Robb and Hassan acted as negotiators for the prisoners as representatives of the Aryan Nations prison gang and the Muslim prisoners, respectively, at the facility. More on their case can be found at lucasvilleamnesty.org. You can check out Queen Tahrirah's podcast entitled Sign of the Times by visiting blogtalkradio.com/New Power Radio Network, and that's new spelled N-U. I apologize at the beginning of Queen Tahrirah's interview. Sounds pretty crappy. That was a technical fail on my part, but it clears up after about 2 minutes. In the second segment, I chatted with Franklin Lopez about subMedia, the importance of anarchist media production, his upcoming anarchist hip-hop podcast, and the new short documentary series they're about to release entitled Trouble. Trouble's available for public showing, so find yourself a venue in your town. Contact Frankie and Company via submedia.tv/get-in-touch. Pass word of the event in town via flyers and word of mouth and anti-social media, and make some friends while you're at it. The first episode will focus on diversity of tactics at Standing Rock with a focus on the Red Warrior Camp. More work by Frankie can be found at submedia.tv. Oh, and there's an announcement of a podcasting network looming on the horizon. More to come on that in future episodes.
The Rebel, Rebuild, Rewild Collective has put out a call for submissions of texts about the strategic lessons that can be learned from the resistance at Standing Rock. As one phase of the resistance has ended and another has begun, the idea is to compile experiences and analyses and reflect on the lessons learned from this game-changing moment in movement history. This project is mostly for the benefit of those who were not present at Standing Rock but who might participate in something similar in the future. The plan is to publish a compilation of thoughtful, strategic analyses both online and in print. However, seeing as it might not be possible to publish everything that people submit, the plan is to put an unedited version of everything that folks submit onto a WordPress site sometime in the future. The call is to write about anything you'd like to, but some leading questions are: which actions were most effective? Which actions were least effective? Do you have any insights on dynamics between indigenous and non-indigenous water protectors? What was unifying? What was divisive? What can we learn from the tactics of DAPL, the police, and the state? What can we learn from the legal battle? And what messages would you like to pass on to future water protectors? Please submit writing to Rebel, Rebuild, Rewild at riseup.net. Submissions can be signed with your legal name and alias or be anonymous. Please include whatever information about yourself that you would consider relevant. If you're listening in Asheville or the surrounding area, there is a benefit show tonight, March 12th, at the auditorium at 1045 Haywood Road in West Asheville. Proceeds will benefit our comrades who were arrested during the inauguration protests in D.C. earlier this year. Also, next Monday the 20th, there will be a dance party to benefit these same J20 arrestees. Come dance to mod, punk, and all the classics, new and old, with DJ Murphy Murph. This will be at the Lazy Diamond at 98A North Lexington Avenue in downtown Asheville. But first, some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
What you say, what you say, what you say, what? A call like a
I was beginning to recover from a 50-day hunger strike and waiting for the Ohio Department of Retribution and Corruption to fulfill their promises. And waiting, when I heard that two of the Lucasville Five, Sadiq Abdullah Hassan and Jason Robb, are undertaking a hunger strike of their own. A hunger strike also related to the ODRC's illegal silencing. Back in 1993, prison officials' incompetence, hubris, and downright ruthlessness provoked the longest prison uprising in American history at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville. When the smoke cleared, the same ruthless prison officials whose irrationality led to the uprising in the first place betrayed all of their promises and set out to manufacture criminal cases against the prisoners they didn't like, prisoners who had been outspoken critics leading up to the uprising. Motivated by vindictiveness and embarrassment, prison officials actually went so far as to fabricate false evidence for framing their hand-picked scapegoats. They also concealed determinative evidence so that the prisoners they framed would never be able to discover and present the truth that would exonerate them. As a consequence of this concerted effort, the Lucasville Five were railroaded all the way to death row and subjected to the kind of bewildering barbarism that would likely drive folks with weaker resolve to suicide. In fact, the ODRC built its super-duper max prison specifically to further isolate those 5 hostages that they intended to murder. Keep in mind that this isolation and silencing is in no way designed for the protection of the public. The public is in no way endangered by a death row prisoner buried in the dungeon of a supermax having a phone conversation with a newspaper reporter. The public is in no way harmed by a death row prisoner giving the media interviews, shackled behind fiberglass on a cell phone video. In fact, I would suggest that if the Lucasville Five are the criminals and killers they have been portrayed to be, then their public exposure, being subjected to the media scrutiny and the hard questions that serious journalists are accustomed to asking, would certainly serve to confirm their guilt, would absolutely reinforce the sense that prison officials and the courts got it right. Right? So, the regimen of silence that the prison officials have imposed on these condemned prisoners for decades, going to great and illegal lengths to prevent these captives from speaking publicly and telling their side of the story, can only be for one purpose: to protect the ruthless and murderous prison managers who sunk to the lowest depths of collusion and corruption, to secure false convictions against their despised prisoner critics. The monsters who mismanage the ODRC hope against hope that they can keep the lid on this, can dupe the common public into blindly hating these poor hostages until each is escorted to the death house and then tossed into their graves. The mismanagers of the ODRC seek to maintain the thoughtless complicity of the common public, seek to prevent the real truth from ever surfacing out there in the free world, opening the eyes of the manipulated and exploited sheeple. So now, after decades of silencing and censorship, facing doom for a provable and deliberate frame-up, Sadiq and Jason have resorted to a hunger strike, desperately struggling to finally have the chance to get their side of the story into the public forum before they are murdered for crimes they didn't commit. The same insidious cabal of liars and scoundrels who still have not restored all of my communications after a 50-day hunger strike are now resorting to the dirtiest of dirty tricks to maintain the duct tape over the mouths of the falsely condemned captives they intend to lead to slaughter, silencing them for their relationship to a Netflix producer. It is clear that in this fascist era, when anyone critical of the official line becomes the fake media, that the truth has been criminalized. And those of us held by the Ohio Department of Retribution and Corruption who have the audacity to tell the truth have our very existence criminalized. Let's hope Netflix is taking action against the ODRC and defending Sadiq and Jason. We can certainly urge Netflix to do so. Hopefully, through the magic of the internet, by the time you hear this, Burst will be able to direct you as to where you can get connected with the efforts to defend Sadiq and Jason. Because it's not just about the two of them, and it's not just about their truth. It's about what kind of future we want to have, and who is going to be in charge of it. It's about the truth, and whether we ever get to hear it, or whether it withers away, silence. This is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain from Warren Correctional in Lebanon, Ohio. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
You can write to Sean Swain at SeanSwain243 Lucasville-205, Warren CI, P.O. Box 120, 5787 State Route 63, Lebanon, Ohio, 45036. Updates on his situation and more writings by Sean can be found at seanswain.org.
We're speaking with Queen Tahira, host of Sign of the Times Blog Talk Radio. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me, Queen.
I'm very happy to be here and very happy to gain your support and getting more exposure for what's taking place at Ohio State Penitentiary. So I'm honored to be here.
Can you talk a little bit about what's going on there? Who are Jason Robb and Imam Sadiq Abdullah Hassan?
A part of what is known as Lucasville 5. The Lucasville 5 were the negotiators pretty much to end the prison uprising that took place on Easter Sunday back in 1993. It was an uprising, a protest against not only what Hassan describes in the movie Captive, but also the fact that the prisoners were tired of being mistreated by the guards and administration. There was a lot of atmospheric pressure, just negotiating things like adequate lunches, having outside time for those who were being denied recreation. It was just a culmination of things that had not been attempted to be worked out by the administration. So it all came to a head on Easter Sunday in 1993, and the Lucasville 5 were part of the negotiators who really prevented any more loss of life from taking place than what unfortunately occurred. And one thing I want to make sure that people understand is that we're not unsympathetic with what took place on that day. We do understand that there was a lot of loss, but not only of life, but resources, time, all of the things that should, to a certain extent, offer us an atmosphere of mutual respect, but just we're not. So we're sympathetic to the loss of life that happened that day. We're sympathetic to the fact that there was some occurrences that happened that day that led to violence and people being hurt. But it is almost like they were forced into a position to defend themselves. And unfortunately, the Lucasville 5 were just made scapegoats and appointed as leaders of the actual uprising instead of being recognized for the fact that they actually participated in saving lives that day.
Yeah, it's been stated a few times that I've seen that they were basically picked, and it was in this documentary too, it was posed this way, that somebody had to take the blame for the death of the guard and the prisoners. So why not pin it on the most visible people who were actually trying to stop bloodshed with Attica in mind?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen it happen, and Attica is a very good example of that. And there then, in those circumstances too, the prisoners were tired of being mistreated and tired of being treated inhumanely. And I don't know anyone that wouldn't eventually get tired, and feel like they needed to protect not only themselves, but, their humanity. And I just don't think that that's beyond measure. And unfortunately, like I said, it's sad that, there's still this air of negativity when you mention the Lucasville 5 in some arenas, to the fact that it's got mainstream media that's out here, painting a certain pictures of not only the Lucasville 5, but confined citizens as a whole. They do a very good job of controlling the narrative. But it's up to you, myself, and others who realize that the system is broken. If the system were not broken, the Lucasville uprising nor the Attica uprising would have happened. And so, these are people who are already in a state of slavery. They're already, to a certain extent, having their human rights violated almost on a daily basis. And it's just time for us to, as people who are on the outside and on the inside, especially if we're related to, if we love and care for the people who are being subjected to this treatment, we have to say something. We have to do something. And we have to hold those people accountable who are making these decisions without any sort of public input, any sort of accountability, any sort of process that they have to necessarily follow. they're basically signing off on each other's stuff. and it's time for it. You know, we have to start paying a lot more attention than what we're currently paying, not only to what's happening to Imam Hassan and Jason. You know, that's why they're doing this. They're not doing this to draw extra attention to themselves. They're doing this to, one, you know, plead their innocence. You know, plead the fact that they were there to help. You know, and Jason and Imam Hassan could not be more polar opposites of each other. You know, but the people from the Aryan nation, the people from the Muslim community, you know, all confined citizens, all under the same pressure, realized that they had a common issue. They had a common enemy in this, and that was to stand up and speak truth to power to the state. And they came together to do that because of that. Now, to me, I don't know about you, but to me, that's phenomenal that was able to happen. And if it can happen behind such a restrictive environment, such a restrictive circumstance, with so much volatility in the air that could have gone any way. There could have been hundreds of people murdered that day and hurt and killed, you know, but it did not go down like that. And that's the part that's so troubling for me and for others who support the Free Ohio movement, who support Imam Hassan, who support Brother Jason, is that, come on now, I mean, it's right in your face. It's right in your face what happened. It's right in your face that these people stepped up, took a chance to a certain extent to not only face, you know, the quote unquote state and the authorities to try to work this out, but also to stand in the trenches when it came to, you know, representing, you know, the brothers who were a part of, you know, trying to just simply speak truth to power. And it's sad that it has gotten this bad to where they can't even speak to the media at this point without facing, you know, now it's 90 days from February the 27th to basically May 27th. They have a 90-day restriction where they can't email, they can't speak on the phone, they can't do video conference. I think they can, I'm pretty sure they can receive mail. We are sending the mail. It's my understanding that they have received at least some of it. But it's crazy that I've never heard of a person not being able to plead their innocence. And I don't think there's any person around that would not want to plead their innocence, especially considering they've been on death row since this all took place and in solitary confinement, which is, you know, in and of itself an inhumane condition.
And can you tell listeners why the administration claims to have shut down their communication?
They basically don't want them pleading their case. They don't want them speaking to the media about their position of innocence and trying to tell their side of what happened. I mean, we've seen it on mainstream media, their side of what happened. We've seen people who were a part of the administration who were actually there. You know, they were a part of this Netflix documentary, Two Captives. But, you know, Hassan and Jason are the only ones who are being punished. And the only reason why they would want to keep them silent, in my opinion and the opinion of the Free Ohio movement, is so that they could not plead their innocence. And as you said, it was easy to point the finger at them because they're the ones who stepped up to the plate to try to get this thing under control and, you know, to make sure that everyone else was safe along with themselves. And they're paying the price for it. Still to this day, 24 years later, they're still paying the price. So
there's a really specific, you and I believe, have both spoken with members of the Free Ohio movement and other activists within the Ohio prison system about their incarceration and the struggles that they're engaged in. But there's something very specific in the case of, well, in general, in Ohio these days, and in particular with their case. Like in the early 2000s, as I understand, the 5 prisoners on death row for negotiating the end of the 93, plus Greg Curry, 93 Lucasville prison uprising, hunger struck and won the ability to conduct media interviews. However, there was a stipulation that they could not show up on camera. And that seems to be like a difference in this Netflix documentary, is that they showed up on camera. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that's important, why their faces and their mannerisms can't be expressed on the media? Yeah, see, now that's another thing that we need to make sure that we're clear on, is that Hassan and Jason had no clue that their video, the actual footage of them speaking,
was going to show up in the documentary. They simply participated in a video conference as an interview, and they decided to place it into the Netflix documentary. Now, how, again, the state is holding them responsible for Netflix taking some creative privilege, we haven't quite figured out, and everything's still in the appeal stage even, but yet they're still on restriction. So, we have to be clear that this was not intentionally done to intentionally break anyone's rules. And another thing that we have to realize is that because there's no oversight from the public on the decisions that they make, the rules that they put in place, it's really easy for them to say, well, you violated such and such rule, but yet, our confined citizens are unaware that this rule even exists. So, one, their appearing on camera was not intentional to upset the apple cart, if you will, and draw negative attention to them. They were simply trying to plead their case, and it just, so happened that it ended up actually showing the footage of them speaking on the phone.
I mean, it seems that being the case, it does seem especially telling that the administration does not want their faces and mannerisms, as I said, to show up. Because I think like that plays on the like common human need to recognize with and to hear and recognize the humanity of people that are stuck in cages, that are, made secret and hidden as this public secret and threat within our society, that this is where you go if you don't fall in line in the ways that or if you just don't look the right way or don't practice faith the right way or what have you.
Yeah, I think it was a very good thing that they showed them, and I'm not against that whatsoever. And you're right, we have to humanize this struggle, not only the struggle of the Lucasville 5, but the struggle of mass incarceration and overprosecution as a whole. We have to humanize this. These are still people. They still have hearts. They still have minds. They still have consciousness. They still have families. They still have friends. They still like to see the sunshine. All the things that, make us human, that it doesn't change because we have citizens behind bars. It just doesn't change. And I don't really think that people have taken a moment to just pause and think about how it would feel to be locked in a cage for, a week, let alone, a year or 24 years, and we're talking solitary confinement. These are not, luxury suites that these guys are in. They are being punished just from being there, let alone all the other things, politics and things like that come into play that affect their day-to-day lives. So, I mean, I like I said, I can't blame them for pleading their case, and I definitely support the fact that they came together to do this and to draw more attention to the case because, that truth has to be told. And we're definitely supporting them for telling it.
So despite the unfairness of the position that the ODRC appears to be taking in this case, has there been any word that you're aware of from Netflix as to argue on the behalf of Jason Robb or Sadiq Abdullah Hassan as to their innocence in the case, that they did not know that their images would be presented?
Yes, we are in the process of reaching out to Netflix and trying to, get that communication established that we really need them to advocate. But the thing is that when these kinds of things take place, when these restrictions are placed on our citizens, our confined citizens, they basically have appeals that you can file. But all too often, the appeal process itself extends past the 90 days or the 30-day restriction. So even though this happened on February the 27th, even though there's been a 90-day restriction placed on them, and I guess the average citizen's mind, you think, okay, if I appeal this, then certainly my appeal will be heard before they, initiate this 90-day restriction. Well, that's not the case. And what's happening with Hassan and Brother Rob, they are being punished while their cases are in appeal. And more than likely, the appeal's not going to happen anytime soon. And if it does happen, it's the same people who, initiated the punishment to begin with, who are also going to hear the appeal. So again, we need more public oversight to make sure that when there is an appeal, that it's heard with at least people who are willing to hear the facts from both sides and willing to make a decision based on those facts. So no, so far Netflix has not offered support, but we are in the process of reaching out to them to make sure that at least they have an opportunity to, support Imam Hassan and Jason as much as they possibly can.
Jason Raab and Imam Hassan are both being held at the Northeast Ohio Correctional Facility, right? The one in Youngstown?
Yes, they're at Ohio State Penitentiary, and the address, should people wish to reach out to them, you can reach out to Jason Raab at his number is 308-919. Sadiq Abdullah Hassan, his number is R130-559. And the address is 878 Coatesville Hubbard Road, Youngstown, Ohio, 44505. And you also can call Warden Ed Sheldon and demand that he rescind the communication restriction for Jason Raab and Sadiq Abdullah Hassan. His phone number is area code 330-743-0700. His fax number is 330-743-0841. And his email address is drc.osp@odrc.state.oh.us. So it's drc.osp@odrc.state.oh.us. And we really need people to flood the email, flood the phone, flood the fax machine to let Warden Ed Sheldon know that we are demanding that he rescind the communication restriction for Imam Hassan and Jason Raab.
So that facility that they're being held at, and I didn't put this into questions, but I wanted to talk for a second about capitalism and the way that incarceration's moving in the United States and in Ohio in particular. Like the video conferencing is only available as a part of this wider pattern in incarceration in the United States, where prisons and jails are moving away from actual in-person visitation that would include human touch and human contact and eye-to-eye contact, and exchanging it with things like the services that JPay offers, for instance, right? And the prison that these men are both being held in is actually run by, I'm forgetting the name of the cute name change that they had, but the Corrections Corporation of America runs that facility, a private prison. Can you talk about the shifting dynamics in terms of communication and human touch in the monetized and further privatizing world of incarceration in Ohio?
Yes. Well, okay, so JPay is definitely a beneficiary of mass incarceration in the private prison industry, not only in the state of Ohio, but in other states as well. And although Ohio's fought hard to get personal visitations, JPay offers the video visitations as an additional quote-unquote service to our confined citizens, where, physical touch is not always permissible. So it worries me by the fact that at any point, those visits where there is that intimacy of being able to actually physically hug, one's loved ones, your wife, your husband, your children, that in and of itself, and I've spoken to, our confined citizens before, that restores not only their humanity, because this is not a normal environment that our confined citizens live in. They're around all, people who basically are the same sex they are pretty much, and there's all this restriction on how you can move, where you can go, when you can eat, when you cannot eat, when you can sleep, all these things. That's not a normal way for anyone to live. So the importance of having that physical contact and communication with each other is important. So I just want to stress that first. And even though JPay, it is nice to have that communication open, and sometimes it's a lot more convenient than the old way that we used to do things, by calling the operator and having them patch through a call and all that kind of stuff. So we welcome the opportunity to have that, but that's not all there is to, making sure that these familial and communal relationships are able to stay in place and be maintained. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you said it very clearly, especially for me popping the question on you without any warning. Thanks so much for the eloquent answers. I really appreciate your candor on the topics. Since we have you on the phone, would you care to talk a little bit about your project, Sign of the Times, and how folks can find your work online?
Yes, certainly. First I want to thank you for allowing us to have the airwaves and to speak on behalf of Jason and Imam Hassan. And we want to stress the importance, that being on a hunger strike, it is not something that our confined citizens do just because they want attention. After 2 weeks on a hunger strike, they have difficulty standing. They suffer from dizziness, sluggishness, weakness, loss of coordination, low heart rate, chills. They lose muscle and muscle mass and fat, from their bodies because of the drop in potassium going to such low and dangerous levels. So this is a health issue, as well as the fact that, this is a human rights protest that we're recognizing and, trying to draw attention to with Imam Hassan and Jason Robb. So folks need to realize that this is not easy. This is not something they're doing just to, say shame on you to the state. These people want their suffering to end, and all forms of suffering when it comes to our confined citizens needs to end. So Sign of the Times was a labor of love that was created after the Zimmerman verdict of July 2013, and it was initiated behind Facebook groups that got together, said, this is enough. The attacks on the Black community have gone way too far, and we need to start networking and communicating and building with one another so that we can heal our community and heal those around us in the process. So we air Tuesday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If anyone would like to look at the archives from the past 4 years almost, they can go to www.blogtalkradio.com/New Power Radio Network, and new is spelled N-U. Check us out. Check out the archives. Join us whenever you want from 6 to 8 Eastern Standard Time, and we talk about a variety of things from community engagement to health and holistic healing, hot topics, where we have Thursday nights dedicated to empowering people and educating them on standing and recognizing their own human rights and reclaiming those and taking their power back. So it's all about community engagement. It's all about making sure that we have a means to communicate that is not necessarily a part of the mainstream media, and that we can have our voices heard and our opinions heard, and we can support one another. So, it's mostly an African-American audience. We have all kinds of guests from around the world that have called in and been guests on our show, as well as people who have spoken. And, we're worldwide. We're in Africa, Thailand, Asia, as well, of course, as the United States. So anytime anybody wants to have their voice heard, I'd love to have you on the air, and we can exchange, and build there around especially this issue of over-incarceration and mass incarceration of our citizens. Anytime you want to come on air, please know that the door is always open for you, and anyone else that, again, would like to have their voices heard, please give me a call. Our phone number is 330-366-6838, 330-366-6838. You also can go onto the freeohiomovement.org website because this work is not easy. And we have raised about $1,600 in the past year, but we've used that and exhausted that in travel expenses and things like that. I'm catching Greyhound between Cincinnati and Cleveland and Columbus and Toledo. We've got an event coming up this weekend that I need to get to, and those kinds of things. So we are building this, and we're building it with the love and help and support of the people. So please go to our website, www.freeohiomovement.org. Check us out. Get involved. We also have a link there for volunteers. So, again, I thank you. I appreciate you. And I send you much love from Imam Hassan and much respect from Jason Robb.
Please send back revolutionary greetings to Imam Hassan.
I sure will.
Well, thank you so much, Queen Tarira, for being on the show, and I look forward to checking out your show. And good luck, Solidarity.
solidarity. We'll talk soon.
Definitely. Thank you. And now here's our conversation with Franklin Lopez. We're speaking with Franklin Lopez. Franklin is an anarchist and a filmmaker whose media has been a huge inspiration for The Final Straw and many other anarchist projects. He was the brain and footwork behind subMedia.tv and their film NCIV, and, allegedly, the mouth and eyes behind the 10-year running videocast It's the End of the World and We Know It and I Feel Fine. It's the end of the world as I know it. Bleh. It's the end of the world as we know it and I feel fine. Thanks so much for coming back onto the show, Frankie.
Thanks for having me, Burrs. Big fan of your show, too.
Oh, shucks. So with the recent end of the effing show, after a 10-year run, you're announcing some new projects that we're quite excited to hear about. What's up with subMedia these days, and what's up with Trouble?
Well, subMedia has been taking a bit of an underground break, and not really a break in the vacation sense, but if people were tuning into the site last year, you could see that we were cranking out videos like almost on a daily basis. But we're developing a new show, partly because the title of the last show was too long. It's the end of the world as we know it and I feel fine, and we wanted to come up with like a one-word show, and so we're calling it Trouble. But seriously, that's pretty bad. No, we took a long, hard look at what we were doing, and if we had the resources, we could have continued the effing show as it's now known. But we wanted to do something that could potentially reach a little more people, but also something that could have a longer shelf life. It's the End of the World as we know it was a news-based show, and so watching it past the 2 weeks after it was released, it didn't make much sense, right? Because the news were already old. And so we want to take on topics and make like 30-minute documentaries every month on a wide range of topics, so that people can screen these things. That's one of the main motivations, so that people watch these shows in groups, whether it be like a few pals hanging out on a Sunday night, or community screenings, or even go big, larger university-sized screenings, with the hope that people who are used to consuming our media online, instead of being isolated and their computer screens or cell phones, they can actually meet other folks, engage in conversation, and obviously the hope is to conspire and launch the revolution.
That's really awesome. That's such a smart approach. Like, I remember when Beach Raven from Crime Think and Chris Hedges had that debate that there were viewing parties all around the country as people streamed the content off of Crime Think's site, and that was already people who were like, all right, let's watch some inter-milieu like grudge match go on. But this is like that seems like a really cool way to engage folks and bring people together, and like an awesome organizing tool, especially for folks in small cities.
Yeah, and when we were having the conversation, we had agreed that maybe it was a little nostalgic to think that this would work, but we put out a trailer for the show last week, and even just based out of the trailer, like a dozen screenings were already organized when we hadn't really put the call out for people to actually screen the work. So we're hoping that it works, and we're hoping that it does what it's supposed to do. But that's a big if. So we'll wait and see what happens with Trouble.
And can you share what you got Trouble-wise up your sleeve? Like, what are the upcoming topics?
So the first show we're doing is on talking about interdynamics in movement. It's about dynamics in the no DAPL struggle, the struggle to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. What we wanted to do was give voice to the folks who were engaged in direct action, because if you were looking at the narratives that were coming out in the media, even leftist media, they focused in on the so-called peaceful aspects of the protests, and they pretty much ignored the folks who were actually physically stopping the pipeline. And so we interviewed four folks who were involved in these actions, and they talked about why they were able to stop the pipeline, why direct action matters. And we talked about a lot of subjects that people who have been in the movement for a while are really familiar with, but maybe new people are not, which is this idea of diversity of tactics, which is something that some people claim it was born out of the Quebec City anti-FTA protests, the Free Trade of the Americas protests, where protest groups had come to an agreement as to respect each other in their preferred ways of resisting. So some folks wanted to engage the police head on. Other folks wanted to do peaceful protests. And so in the agreement, it's basically said, like, we're going to respect this, and we're not going to like call each other out in the media. We're not going to criticize each other out in publicly. We're going to have these conversations, like, within ourselves. And it seems like in Standing Rock, these agreements were not made, and a lot of people were not really informed that these things could happen. And so there was fighting that happened between folks who disagreed with the folks who were doing the direct actions. And so we want to unpack that whole thing within the context of Standing Rock, just because it's what's most recent, in the hopes that we don't have to do this again. And again, or maybe that's a lot of wishful thinking. But the last time this was successfully deployed, this idea of diversity of tactics, was in 2008. Well, not the last time, but the last time in recent memory, during the Republican National Convention protests in the Twin Cities. And I don't think it was perfect, but I think it worked out fairly well considering everything that went down over there. And so that's going to be the first episode, and that comes out on March 26th. At 8 p.m., but people who might want to screen the film, we will be making the whole video available to folks 2 days in advance. So all the from the 24th onwards, people can actually download this and screen it in their communities.
And just to give a clue back to what you said about the Twin Cities conference, if listeners want to search out what came to fruition out of that, it's called the St. Paul Principles, and you can search it. And Unconventional Action Mid-Atlantic has a link of the 4 principles.
And we made a film about the protests that talks about that too. If people want to search subMedia, ground noise and static, talks about how those agreements were made and what they mean.
So you've invested a lot of the last 22 years of your life making anarchist and anti-colonial media. In your mind, why is this an important investment in struggles against systems of oppression?
Well, it's twofold. I mean, the first thing is I'm very interested in movements of resistance and liberation owning their own means of media production. And nowadays it's a prime example where people are just basically producing media and basically giving it away to Facebook, to the social media networks, and not really owning the infrastructure that it takes to make and disseminate this media. And so even though as a small operations as we have been since the beginning, we can certainly say that most of the stuff that we do and how we get it out there, it falls on us. It's our means of production and to a certain degree distribution. So that's one aspect. But the second aspect is because when you look at documentaries, for instance, which is one of the main ways that people used to disseminate information about topics such as like the environment, police brutality, etc., war, a lot of these documentaries are made through the filter of foundation money, through grant donations, through the film festival circuit. So while the people who are making these documentaries may be radicals and anarchists themselves, a lot of times their politics don't come through because in their quest to reach more people, they are forced to soften or water down their politics in order for these things to be accepted through whatever grant cycles or film festivals, as I mentioned. And for me, even though I know that possibilities for funding for the type of media that we make are not very big, like we don't have a large pool of resources to make money. Like I would say, 90% of our income comes from small donations, anywhere from $1 to like $50. We want to be able to be the equivalent of what AK Press does for books. We want to be able to people who want to look for radical content that's in video or in film, that they could find it. Because, while I think that sometimes these more sort of liberally documentaries and films are useful in terms of getting people in the door, whetting their appetites, I don't think that there's not a wide variety of media that delves into like the nitty gritty of organizing and the nitty gritty of like resistance movements, etc. And so that's certainly a huge motivation behind what we do. But sadly, we really haven't seen like a huge proliferation of really truly radical and anarchist film and media. And I really don't know what that is. We're constantly on the search. We find little examples here and there. But, and this is not to toot our own horn, because we rather see more people doing similar things or even better things than we do. But, we are some of the only people who are consistently trying to push the boundaries of radical discourse within film and video.
While you may not see an actual like influx or increase in other people doing the production, you do see, I hope, the impact that your cultural intervention is having in movements and in the way that people engage in discourse and action around systems of oppression, right?
Well, it's sometimes it's hard to tell, and this is one of the reasons why I like doing these screenings. Especially, I like going to screenings where our stuff is projected, because that's really the only real metric that I have in terms of seeing the impact these things have. This is really where I get to engage people one-on-one, where they get to tell me like, how this has changed their perspective about this and that. But most of the time, like like a lot of our media work, it takes place behind a desk, behind a computer screen. I mean, and sometimes it's hard to gauge. And so yeah, I mean, I've gotten a bit of a sense of what that is, but sometimes I try to keep that in check, because I there's no real way for me to sort of measure that, but I think the proof that people have been supporting us monetarily and kept us alive for all these years, I think it's an indication that people do appreciate what we're doing and would like to see more, would like to see us keep going. I
recall hearing that you were working on a podcast. Can you tell us a little about what your plan is with that and what it's called and when you'll be premiering it?
Yeah, it's the concept is fairly simple. The podcast will be called Burning Cop Car, and the concept is my passion, which is radical hip hop. And so the plan is to produce a weekly, fairly short, 30-minute just radical hip hop podcast with not a lot of talking. Just basically introduction. Depending on the week, maybe read a piece of news that made an impact on us, or even like a quote by a anarchist or a radical thinker. But really, what I'm doing, if I'm going to be completely honest, is like I love to jog, and I always think like, man, if I could just like have like a 30-minute mix of like radical hip hop, I would just be like so much more happier in my exercise routine. And so I'm doing this for myself as a way to give myself like a radical hip hop mix, so that I can go in jogging with, but also for other people who might want to do that, or people who are just like really thirsting for that radical hip hop. Because in the anarchist milieu, like I think the preferred like music type is punk, and like all my friends listen to punk, and I just think that people need to give radical and anarchist hip hop a try, and so I would like to spread that, more in the same way that I like to see more people make radical film. Maybe if I push this idea of like anarchist hip hop, like more people will go out there and make some anarchist hip hop.
Do you ever feel like when you engage in these projects that somebody sees you doing it and sees the amount of quality and attention and experience that you put into it, that it actually dissuades other people from doing it because they're like, oh, well, that guy's already got it?
Some people have told me, we want to do this project, but we don't want to step on your toes. And I'm just like, that's the most un-anarchist thing to say. It's like I'm always saying, please step on my toes. Like what we need is a lot of toe stepping happening right now. We need people producing this media. But I always say this when I talk about the things that inspire me to do what I do. And I was already like before I became a radical, I was already producing videos, and I was a VJ for clubs and raves and stuff like that. But one of the things when I started engaging with anarchists was people started handing me zines and stuff like that, and and I would read them very interestedly and very curiously. But it was not until people gave me like Crime Think books, and I saw the quality of the layout and all the love that went into these productions, that I thought to myself, man, like, this is what anarchy needs. It's like more quality media. And so I think that one of the biggest traps that activists and radicals and anarchists sort of fall into is that people will understand if our stuff is kind of not really well produced, because it's low budget and it's coming from from the radical circle, so people will understand. And my answer is always no. People will not understand, and they will not read it, and that will be pretty much like a wasted effort. And I think that for people who are interested in creating media, I understand there's a learning curve and that you get better as the years go by. But like you said, I've been doing this for like over 2 decades, and so it didn't get to this spot like immediately. It took making a lot of crappy media and trying again until I got to the point where I was happy with what we were producing. And so my point is that people should honor their audiences. If you produce something that you yourself wouldn't consume, then don't really expect other people to consume it, right? And I'm sorry to sound like such a hard ass, but I think that one of the reflections that we have from last year is really looking at Breitbart Media or even a crazy idiot like Alex Jones. When you look at their stuff, even though their content is crap or whatever, it's high quality. It's well produced, even if you disagree with everything that it says. And nobody would have really thought that some, like sort of wingnut outfit like Alex Jones or Breitbart would now be in the position of, being like a really huge influence in the way politics are run in the United States and now by extension the world. And so I think that when people should really take that context seriously and think about if they really want to make a change and an impact in the way that society runs, then they really should, take their media making super, super seriously. This is, the reason why we do this is because we can reach a lot of people with a very few resources. And if you want to reach a lot of people and hopefully change hearts and minds, it's got to be stuff that they can enjoy, they can consume, that can compete with the other crap that's out there.
So, if anyone's turned on by this conversation and like is excited for, for the voice of STEM to say that they should be out there creating media and doing a good job, and it's a learning curve, where should they? Sorry to put you you're not just the voice of STEM, but where should they start, and where can they do you have any just starting off suggestions about how to get involved and how to make what they care about?
I think people who want to create media, when I say media, I should say, to be more specific, create video or even audio. It's like nowadays most people have the equipment that they need in their pocket. Smartphones capture high quality video and high quality audio these days. And so without making a huge investment, you probably already made a huge investment with a $500 phone. You can start and you can figure out if this is something that you want to do. And I think that couple that with the reality now that if you go to YouTube, there's so many tutorials on how to do pretty much about everything. I'm an addict for going on how to learn to do the editing techniques, effects, and stuff like that. There's folks out there who just do these little tutorials and they're super helpful. And so, the tools are out there. Most people have like I said, most people have a smartphone. Most people have some sort of laptop or computer and an internet connection. And so there you go. You have the grand majority of the tools that you need. If you feel that, after you've done it for a while that it's working out for you, then go ahead and buy yourself a nicer camera and then take that step up. But do understand that this is a lot of work. I get volunteers who help out in subMedia every year, and a lot of them don't last. A lot of them just kind of don't. They don't really. They get the realization that this is not really glamorous work. It's a lot of work just sitting your butt in front of your computer and just doing a lot of this grunt work. But the reward is awesome, especially when you're able to convey ideas clearly and that can reach people. That's a really good reward. And so in the end, that's what keeps me going. Every time we put out a new video out and we saw that people got something out of it, that's another kick in the ass to start working on the next one.
I'm really excited to hear Burning Cop Car, as I've one of the things about the effing show that I enjoyed so much was the little hip hop bumpers that you would create, and because it was just a little cookie crumb of hey, here's this delicious thing, check this out. Here's the name of the artist, here's the track, find out more. But not only did it transition well between segments, it also clued people into some music videos as well as really cool tracks. I really like when Rebel Beat does hip hop episodes too, although they seem kind of infrequent these days.
Yeah, they are doing the shows. I think irregularly right now, and so when they call me back to be a guest host, I guess I'll bring back the hip hop.
Cool, cool. I don't know how frequently. I know that you've interviewed on your shows or in your films folks who speak Spanish, but I wonder why don't you ever produce any audio like podcasts or whatever in Spanish or videocast in Spanish, or do you?
It's just an issue of time. I tried, like I did 2 shows in Spanish, and they did all right. I went to Cancun for the COP16 climate summit, and there was going to be some protests over there. And both video reports that I cranked out of there, I also made them in Spanish. But on a week-to-week basis, that means that I have to translate everything that I do, and then record it and try to sync it. And with the Effin show, both of those episodes that were done in Spanish, I didn't re-record my lips for the stimulators mouth, and so it just looked like a really bad sort of dub of kung fu movies, and so it just adds a layer of work that we just don't have the capacity to do that right now. The new show, and it'll make more sense when you see it, but the host has a bandana over his head, over his face, and so we never see his mouth move, and so that definitely gives us the opportunity to do overdubs without having the awkward unsunk lip movement happening. And we have a person coordinating the translations, so they will come out with the show.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
by the first one, we're going to have like at least 6 languages for the first show. We'll see if we can keep that up. And so having those translations already done might add us maybe like 1 or 2 days of work, finding different voices to fill the different people and doing an overdub in different languages. So, and then definitely Spanish would be like one of the top ones up there. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a desire to do that. It's just a matter of time and resources.
There's a new project on the horizon. There's a specter haunting the RSS feeds of the web. This specter is Channel Zero Network. Do you have anything you want to say about CZN?
Yeah, I think that when it comes out, well, I should say what it is. I don't think we've come up with like a consensed upon description, but it's a network of anarchist podcasts and radio shows that are going to be collected all in one website. And it's the hope is to have an audio player that plays just like a stream, like opening the faucet of like anarchist content in English, so that if you're just doing the dishes or whatever, you can just turn that on like you turn on the radio and just listen to the Soulcast or listen to the Final Straw or the Ex-Worker or the IGD cast and get your fill of anarchist content, audio content. And I think it's a super smart idea. I think Soul gets the credit for getting us all together and agreeing to do this. And again, it's a bit reactionary because we've seen how right-wing podcasts who have created networks have had a tremendous amount of success. And I think that, to use the old adage, like we're stronger together. I know it sounds like trite and I don't know, but
fascist.
But I think. Or fascist.
No.
but in a sense, it's absolutely right. I mean, I think that we all retain our autonomy as independent producers, but but showing that we're a common front, for all the good things that we want and against all the bad that's out there. So sorry about that. All the bad stuff that's out there.
Oh, I can edit it. It's no problem.
Okay. Yeah, so that's it. We're still working on the website, but it should be pretty interesting. And the thing that excites me the most about the new network is that the folks from the Black Autonomy Federation are also going to be taking part in this. And so the Black Autonomy News Hour is going to be part of this network as well. And that's hugely important, partly because the folks who are doing it are ex-Black Panthers who became anarchists and have some perspective that we never ever get to hear. I mean, it's very rare that you get to hear from African American socialist libertarians or anti-authoritarians, as they like to call themselves, and and I'm really excited for the prospect that this is going to get out there as well.
For anyone who is listening and producing audio content and they might want to join up, I guess we'll probably, hopefully by the time that this airs, we'll have an email, like a contact email address, and maybe even the website up, right?
That's we can all hope, but I mean, as things go, like, you know, all of these things are you know, you shoot for the stars and you reach the moon, and sometimes it takes a little while. It takes a little longer than we expect, but I know we're going to get this out, and it's going to be awesome once it's out.
Absolutely. Well, that about does it for this interview. For fans of the effing show, they were promised that the stimulator would pop up from time to time. As we close out, can you give us a spank you very much to hang on to?
Spank you very much, Burst, and thank you very freaking much for having me in the show, and thank you for doing all that you do.
It's a real pleasure, and thank you so much, Franklin. Take care, buddy.
All right. Take care, Burst.